Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of AACRAO's Credential Chats. We are joined this episode by Alex Kaplan, who is consulting with AACRAO. He is co-leader for Project Infuse. Alex, thank you so much for joining Credential Chats.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, before we jump into Project Infuse, which I think this will be the first time we've talked about it on Credential Chats, I wanted to just ask you about, you representing ACRO in December for congressional testimony related to learning employment records. Um, you know, I, I took that as a really big signal that this is not just niche stuff that a few people think is important, but we have lawmakers who are paying attention.
Yeah, I mean that's completely accurate. I mean, it was the first time uh there had been any congressional hearing on the topic of learning and employment records. And I think the reason that it's happening right now is there's a lot of emphasis and interest in creating new and different pathways for people to represent the skills that they have and to help them get jobs and move throughout their careers. And learning and employment records are really an essential component of all of that. And so it's a bipartisan issue. One of the things that was very encouraging being in front of Congress was it was a bipartisan issue. There's just no debate that anything we can do to make it easier for people to get jobs, navigate the talent marketplace is a good thing. And they were particularly interested in the benefits it would deliver, how it would be done on a national basis, how they might be able to help from a legislative perspective in order to continue to move this along. So it was a really interesting experience. I had never done that before. I've testified at the White House, but never in front of Congress. And I feel, it was a great honor to be asked to do it.
Yeah, and watching the recording of it, it was definitely clear that it was bipartisan. It was also really clear that you know they had interest in this. That lawmakers were asking really good questions, it seemed like, right, that they were prepared, and that, and for anybody who hasn't watched the recording, yeah, and ACRA was not one of, a long line of people who each had 3 minutes or something. Alex was one of only three people who spoke. One Scott Cheney of Credential Engine, who's been on Credential Chats, was one of the others. And Alex, when you're hearing the questions from these lawmakers, what in your mind as a representative of ACRO in those conversations really kind of leapt to the importance of registrars and, enrollment management professionals in the future of this learning employment record space?
Sure. Well, and Scott Pulsifer, who's the president of Western Governors University. So yes, there were a thing that needed and the opportunity they had to be there is we're neutral in this topic. A lot of expertise. Our membership has a lot of say over how this critical data that's going to be part of learning and employment records is used, how it's been delivered, how it needs to be validated and verified. And we've also built a really strong coalition of 35 plus organizations who are interested in this infrastructure. So the particular reason that they asked me is they wanted somebody who was neutral in it and had a broad knowledge of both the history and the current state. So, I collaborate a lot with Melanie and Mike and others in ACRO and with the foundations who support us and others of my colleagues to make sure that I was presenting a message that uniformly reflected all the good work that's been done for the last number of years across many different organizations. And they really appreciated that. And then, of course, Scott from Credential Engine talked a lot about their good work, and Scott from Western Governors about theirs. But my job was to be the neutral expert in all of it.
And thank you, by the way, for representing ACRA members in that congressional testimony.
Mhm.
Shifting to Project Infuse, we've had, you
Mhm.
mentioned Mike Simmons, you mentioned Melanie Gully, the executive director of ACRA. We've had them on the show, and we've heard about uh, the previous efforts around LERs that ACRO and other organizations like UPSIA, EDUCAUSE, One Ed Tech have led. But this is our first time getting to hear about Project Infuse. And so, just at a 30,000-foot level, how do you describe Project Infuse?
Project Infuse is designed to solve a really important problem for academic institutions in the United States, and that's to make available public good infrastructure that can provide that digital credential capability at low cost or no cost. So if you look at the landscape of universities that are, as community colleges and others that are using LERs today and are involved in the digital landscape, most of them are pretty well resourced. And so Project Infuse came about because there are 4,000 plus institutions in the United States. And, most of them struggle with resources. They don't have deep, complex technological skills. And so they need an easy way to participate in this. So there's a strong interest and a strong desire to participate, but it has to be in a way that can work for an institution where, the head of IT might be the registrar. I mean, these are a lot of organizations where people play different kinds of roles. And so that's the goal of Project Infuse, is to provide this low cost, no cost public good infrastructure so that every university in the United States can participate, regardless of, their resource ability.
And when you talk about this infrastructure, just in case people are unclear, like what does he mean? And also, does this have implications to budgeting and RFPs that we may have been planning on? Are we going to be able to just actually have a free bus pass to go along for this ride? Or, when you talk about infrastructure, maybe just kind of simplify it with sort of example of a Project Infuse would enable users to do.
Yeah. And it is fairly straightforward. Almost every academic institution in the United States has the ability to issue a transcript in a PDF format, but not all of them have the ability for that PDF format to be a digital file. So, much like nowadays, in some states you can get your driver's license as digital and it can be on your phone. The idea here is to make it such that anybody who's gone through an institution and the credential that they get is in that kind of a digital format, so they can carry it with them on their phone. They can use it to apply for jobs and other kinds of things. And so the intent is for us, the infrastructure, to meet everybody where they are. So everybody issues PDF files, transcripts. We're going to take those transcripts, we're going to convert them into a digital format. And then we're going to enhance them to make sure that their standards align, they're aligned with how these digital wallets are coming out. And we're taking a look at how artificial intelligence might be able to leverage that information. So it's to solve that problem so that organizations can get out of PDF and get into digital world, and that's the fundamental problem. And everybody's affected by this because the more people we have in digital world, the more ubiquitous this becomes, the better it is for individuals and others to be able to share this kind of information through digital wallets.
And so, and I guess when you talk about PDS, you're talking about physical, like things that would be printed out.
Yeah, well, I mean, they are printed out, but remember, they're also, you can take a PDF, you can save it to your laptop. But the problem with a PDF is that you don't have the ability to, I call it to sort of take apart what's on it. So, right, every PDF has a course, right? It has a grade, um, the student's name, where they went to school, and GPA and that kind of stuff. So that's really important information. But in order for us to really help people with those credentials, we need to understand, well, what skills and competencies did they learn in that course? What's the level of their skill and competency in that course? And compare that to what kind of career opportunities or education opportunities there might be for people based upon that information. So the physical form of it, the PDF, gives us a baseline of information, but there's so much information available out there where if we can see somebody's transcript, We can help them understand, what do they learn in microeconomics 101 and how does that compare what others have learned around the country? And then they can use that information again to look for jobs, apply for graduate school, whatever it might be.
Gotcha. So for anybody who was wondering what you meant when you're talking about, moving things digital, that it's not the PDFs aren't digital, it's about having new, more sophisticated formatting to the digital files that are going to be able to tell a richer story about what's contained within the transcript and with the ultimate purpose of enabling, it sounds like mobility.
Yep, well put. I like that description.
And just to clarify, and when you talk about mobility, I think a lot of times um, transcripts with regard to mobility, it's, institution to institution of education, that it's, moving between offices of admissions and registrars. But I also hear you talking, throughout this interview about employment. And so, is part of this mobility not just about in it or in addition to, learning mobility, that it's also about using learning records to enhance people's or empower people's sort of employment mobility as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So remember, LER stands for Learning and Employment Records. And so the original concept behind learning and employment records, when we began this, I was on the commission that created learning and employment records. The original idea behind it is that if we could look at the employment records that people have, right, where they worked, what their job classification was, what kind of skills they developed, and we could combine those with their academic achievements and what they've learned and what kind of skills are built for that. Now we have a much more powerful thing for people to work with. And so they are, in my mind, that's the next generation of all of this is let's take all that learning, let's take all that skill and competency, the hard work that everybody did, let's make it available and obvious to the employer. And also remember, there are 30 million people in the United States, at least, who have some college but no degree. And so when they go to apply for a job, they have nothing to present. But in the digital world, we can take all the classes that they took. So we can identify the skills and competencies that they built in those classes, and they can now use that as part of their personal portfolio. So it's just, it empowers everybody, honestly. And on the employer side, remember the employers, they're genuinely interested in what do you know how to do? What did you learn? What do you know? And they have a lot of confidence, but the more that they can know, the better they can see whether you're a good fit for the kind of position that you have open.
Mm. Yeah, that we're at the end of the day enhancing trust and not just saying what people did, but enabling institutions to help equip them with learners with narratives about what they know and are able to do as well, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up that word trust because it's particularly for our membership a really important to, to talk about is that the work that AACRAO is doing around these digital credentials is anchored in the concept of trust, that a digital credential can be traced back to the institution that issued it, that that institution has control over that credential, that they can verify that the credential is accurate. So when that goes out into digital world, it has the stamp of, hey, this is a real credential, and the institution approves of it to augment, because that's where trust comes to play. And of course, registrars are just essential in all of this, right? They're the gatekeepers of trust for those kinds of credentials. And of course, they're working with faculty and administration in order to, agree that a person has achieved this kind of goal and objective. But trust is an anchor component here because with the explosion of digital credentials, frankly, there's a lot of stuff out there that ain't so great. And, the bad information drives out good information. And so it's essential for all of this to work, which is why we need a national public good infrastructure that people trust this information, this digital information. I mean, a lot of people describe this as it's very similar to an ATM network or when you use your credit card, like how does the bank know you are who you are? And, we're bringing that same concept academic and academic credentials.
Well, I don't think there's a better note to end on for credential chats than registrars being essential to this work. Folks, he is Alex Kaplan. He is co-leader for Project Confuse and consultant with AACRAO. Alex, thank you so much for joining us on AACRAO's Credential Chats.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be here.
And thank you, everybody, for taking the time and energy to join us for this episode of Credential Chats. Until next episode, have a badge-worthy week, everybody. So long.